Dear students, you are welcome to my class. You know, before it, we started the chapter boys, and we discussed about what is boys and the kinds of boys. Today, we shall discuss about the roots of boys active into passive. Okay, now look at the book. You see, I have set some rules on the board. Now I shall discuss them. Rules for changing active into passive. You know, in the question you have given some active boys, then you have to make them passive. So we have to know the rules for changing active into passive. Okay. The first rule is the object of the verb in the active voice becomes the subject of the verb in the passive voice. That is, the object of the verb in the active voice becomes the subject of the verb in the passive voice. That is, object will be subject in the passive voice. Object will be subject in the passive voice. This is the first rule. Okay. Second rule, the subject of the verb in the active voice becomes the object in the passive voice, generally preceded by the preposition by. Okay. Rule 2, the subject of the verb in the active voice becomes the object in the passive voice. That is, subject will be object. Subject will be object and generally preceded by the preposition by. It will be preceded by the preposition by. Okay. So we have understood that subject will be object in the passive voice. The subject of the active voice will be object in the passive voice, and it is generally preceded by the preposition by. Okay. Now rule 3. The main verb is changed into the first participle. The main verb is changed into the first participle. You have to remember the main verb in active voice will always be first participle in the passive voice, and it is preceded by the correct form of the verb to be in passive voice. You know, there will be a correct form of passive voice according to tense. It will be according to tense. You have to use a correct form of the verb to be. You have to use a to be verb before the first participle form of the verb in the passive voice. Okay. Now, dear students, we have understood the 3 rules. That is, I am again saying object will be subject and subject will be object, and it will be preceded by the preposition by, and the main verb will be in first participle form. Always the main verb will be in first participle form, and there will be a to be verb in the passive voice before the first participle form of the verb. There will be a to be verb according to tense. These are the 3 rules we have discussed. Okay. Now I have given an example. You follow. Then it will be clear to you. Okay. In active, Mina writes a letter. In active voice, there is Mina writes a letter. You see, Mina is the subject. You see, Mina is the subject. What part of speech here? Mina is subject here. Okay. Mina is subject and write is the verb. What is the position of this word? Verb. This is verb. Subject, verb, and you see the next is the object. Next is the object. So you see, this is subject, this is verb, and this is object. So we saw 3 parts of the sentence: subject, verb, and object. Now we have to make the object subject, and the subject will be object, and we have to use the first participle form of the verb, and also there will be a to be verb before the first participle form of the verb. Okay. Follow the passive. According to rule, you have to write, at first you have to write a letter. You have to write a letter. You see, object will be subject. So object a letter will be subject here. So at first you have to write a letter. Then a to be verb before the first participle of the verb. A to be verb as this is present indefinite, so that to be verb will be a measure. So we have to use is after a letter. A letter is and write. This is the main verb. Main verb will be in past participle form. So write will be write, write, wrote, written. Written is the first participle form. So write will be written. This is the first participle form. And subject mina will be object. Will be object by the preposition by. So it will be by mina. Mina will be by mina. So you see, at first you have to write a letter, then a to be verb is, then the first participle form of the main verb written. Write, wrote, written, and then the subject will be object, and it will be by mina. Mina will be by mina, by the preposition. Okay. In this way, you have to use this above three rules. You have to use. Okay. Now we are discussing about. I think you have understood from the example. You have understood the above three rules. Now we are discussing about the verb patterns of passive verbs. You see, the verb patterns of passive verbs will be as follows. That is, to be verb. To be verb will be used according to tense. According to tense, you have to use the to be verb before the first participle of the verb, of the main verb. Okay? You see this above, then it will be clear to you. You see tenses, and in the next side, this is verb to be. Okay? If the active voice is simple present, then you have to use amisa as to be verb. You have to use amisa. I am again saying, if the active voice is simple present, then you have to use am or is or are according to subject before the first participle form of the main verb. Okay? If the active voice is simple first, then you have to use was where as to be verb before the according to tense before the first participle of the principal verb. Okay? So if we see the active voice is simple first, then we shall use was or were as to be verb before the first participle form of the main verb. Okay? If we see the active voice is continuous, either present continuous or past continuous, then you have to use am, is, are or was, were plus be. You have to use, if it is present continuous, then you have to use am or is or are and then be. If you see it is past continuous, then you have to use was or were plus be. So if we see the active voice is present continuous or past continuous, then you have to use am or is or are or was or were plus be as to be verb. Okay? Before the first participle form of the main verb in passive voice. Okay? If we see the active voice is perfect tense, either present perfect or past perfect, then you have to use had or has or had plus be as to be verb. Okay? If we see the active voice is present perfect, then we have to use have or has plus be. And when we see the active voice is past perfect, then we have to use had plus be. In this way, we have to use this structure according to tense. You have to use had or has or had plus be. Okay, in this way, we have to use the to be verb. But if we see the active voice is future, then we have to use shall or will plus be. Shall or will plus be. Okay, in this way we have to use to be verb according to tense. If we see simple present, then we have to use am is a. If we see simple past, then we have to use was were. If we see continuous, then we have to use am is are was were plus either am or is or are or was or were plus be. If we see the active voice is perfect, either present perfect or past perfect, then we have to use have, has or had plus be. And if we see the active voice is future, then we have to use shall or will plus be. In this way, we have to use to be verb according to tense. In the passive voice, before the past participle of the main verb. Okay, dear students, in my previous class, we have started voice. We have discussed what is voice, kinds of voice, active and passive voice. Today we have discussed rules for changing active voice into passive voice, and also we have given an example for your easier understanding, and also we have discussed verb patterns of passive voice. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you. All the best.